Hey there! In the last lesson, we talked about returning values from methods inside of classes. Today, or I guess in this lesson rather, we're going to talk about subclassing. And this is where JavaScript goes from a scripting language into a full programming language. This is really what stepped it up from that lower class interactive browser only language to, wow, holy crap, this is a legitimate language and we can do all sorts of amazing things with this. So, leaving off where we were, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up some of this code, and I just wanted you to watch me clean up some of this code so that you know where I'm leaving off, how I got to where I got to. So I'm getting rid of all of that. I'm going to get rid of all of that. That's unnecessary. And I'm going to add this dot sound is equal to woof. And when the animal speaks, it's going to say this dot sound, whatever that might be. Now, realistically, this doesn't make sense because the species, we could say the species is a cat and it's going to woof, but let's just ignore that error for now. The point that I want to get to is subclassing. Now, subclassing is the ability to extend code because you should never have to write code more than once. Now, that's ideal, and if you're going to do the whole don't repeat yourself methodology, that's great. Just remember, don't take it to the extreme. The whole DRY, the don't repeat yourself methodology, if you take it to the extreme, it actually starts working against itself and your code becomes very, very complicated. However, subclassing lets us overwrite methods and properties from other classes. So, what if we have another class? And this class is going to legitimately be a dog class. And it's just going to extend animal. Now, we use the keyword extends because this class, dog, the one we're currently working on, is going to inherit everything in here. It takes on everything. It's like completely cloning the entire object. It's amazing. Now, why is that amazing? Because now we don't have to write this.species, this.name, this.height, this.sound. We don't have to rewrite functions or methods like speak or the constructor. It automatically takes everything from its parent. So it is essentially like cloning yourself. If you cloned yourself, you would have two of you with the exact same properties, right? Don't think too much about that. Cloning actually doesn't work that way. Anyways, so in here, in our dog class, we already have a constructor. The constructor was inherited from animal. So we don't need to write constructor and put our code in there. It's unnecessary. What we can do, however, is we can overwrite speak because dogs only ever make one sound. So let's write our method in here, console.log new sound. Woof. Okay, so here we have dog extends animals, and we have speak here, and we have speak here. Now by default, if we create a new animal object, whatever this is, so if we look up here, it matches this animal, and if we run the dog.speak method, it's going to run this.sound, which refers to this.sound, which is wolf. Now, that's all good and whatnot, and it's starting to sound a little bit complex, I know, because there's a lot of reference points. We're referencing back and forth, but through these references is how we get extremely efficient code. Instead of declaring dog as a new animal, we say variable dog is equal to new dog. We know that this class extends the animal class, and so it also has the constructor method in there. So when we create a new dog object, so we can go straight up to its parent class. And by the way, when you extend another class, it's called subclassing. And so in here, we could just write, well, what is the species? Well, it's dog, but technically that doesn't matter because this is going to be a dog. And the name could be, well, what do we want to name the dog? Let's name this dog Chandler. Now, because this species is irrelevant, because we now have a subclass that does exactly what we need it to be. It does exactly what we need it to do. What happens? Hold on, let's backstep. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Console.log dog. That rhymed, unintentional. Let's take a look at the page. And now we have dog, the height, its name, the sound that it makes, and its species. But if we look at the sound that it makes, it's still woof. And the sound it's supposed to is, well, this one. Now the difference here is this is a property and this is a method. So if we did console.log dog.speak, is it going to say woof or is it going to say new sound woof? I didn't add the parentheses, so it returned the entire method. There we go, new sound woof, undefined. And that's because that's all this is looking for. There we have it. In fact, actually, I did that a little bit funny because in my head, classes, methods rather, always return a value. In this case, it doesn't return a value, it goes straight to the console, so it's trying to console log. There's no use doing that. We just do dog.speak and semicolon, not a colon, and there we go. That's why we got the undefined error before. It was trying to console log. So now, if we wanted to get rid of species, we don't know what the species is, so we're going to call this unknown. And constructor species. What happens when we do this? What happens when we overwrite our species? Well, that's not our species, our constructor. This dot species is equal to species. That's all I want to do. And so now this should say dog. We are going to do this the right way this time in console log dog. And the species should be species, but does it also keep its name? Find out. It says this is not defined. Well, why? Why is this no longer defined? JavaScript line 19, what does that say in here? Look at that. This dot species does not exist. Now, why is that? Well, species does exist here, but because we're overwriting the entire constructor, none of this other stuff exists at all. So what happens if we comment out, go back to our console, refresh, we still get this is not defined on line 18. It's trying to overwrite the constructor, which seemingly it does not like. So how do we get the species in here? How do we change what the species is? Well, we can give dog its own method that changes its species. So not change, because we're not changing a species, we're setting the species. And we say species, this dot species is equal to species. It's not a species. You know when you say a word so many times it starts to lose its meaning? That's the word species for me right now. So now we have just set up the animal object with a name. That's all it requires. Now we have dog. And in order to set the species, we do set species, and it could be dog. Now, if we console log dog, the species should be, ideally, exactly what we told it to be. And there we have it. Look at that, species is dog. Now what happens if we don't set this? Refresh, species is unknown. So now we're overwriting what a property is from a subclass, because species is automatically inherited, and so the dog species is automatically, I'm doing air quotes here, unknown. And that's because this line essentially is copied down into this class. Now that's what subclassing is. Now, why would you ever use subclassing? Well, that's a great question. Because instead of writing his name over and over and over again, or having to write another method, set name, and we have name in here. Whoops, indenting is not my friend today. This dot name is equal to name. Why write this over and over again? When not only we would have to write this for dog, but for cat, and for fish, and for all the other animals, or we can simply add the method to its parent class, and we can use set name anywhere. So let's do that. Dog.setName, and his name is no longer Chandler. His name is now Monica. And when we console log dog, we'll see that the name is being set, and it's overriding this one. I refresh the page, and there we go. The name, again, is Monica. So now we don't have to write the same functions over and over again. Now, if you're asking me, Caleb, why on earth would I do it this way when I could just write one global function called change name and change the name? then I would say, well, why even write that at all when you could just write variable name is equal to Caleb and then do a ton of code down here and then change the name again. And so by that argument, we now have one name, one variable that is only ever applicable to the entire page or the entire scope that it's living in. And why is that a bad thing? Because when we're dealing with groups of data, a dog, for example, has a name. My dog has a name, your dog might have a name, your neighbor's dog might have a different name. They all have different names. What about their species? Well, their species are all dogs, that's fine. But we know this because the dog class extends from animal. So all animals have some of the same characteristics. For example, fur. Well, most animals have fur. But if we wrote another class, say class bird extends animal, we would change its fur, or its, I guess, I don't know, how would I describe that? Its type of hair or its skin or whatever. We would change it from fur or hair to feathers. But every animal can make a sound, so when it speaks, what's a sound going to be? Every animal has a set of eyes, right? So if you're making a video game, you can have a function in here, or a method in here rather, that says, look, and it's going to, I don't know, look around the room, look for objects or something. Or if you wanted to, for example, the dog class could have a method, jump, where the dog jumps. Whereas the fish class, the fish subclass, might not have that ability to jump because, why? It's a fish. It doesn't need to jump. It just swims. So now you can add more to it. And this is the power of subclassing. And with all of this, you're keeping all your information together in one grouped area in a way that makes sense. Because, again, your dog can jump. But if you have a fish, does that make sense? Fish.jump? No, that doesn't make any sense. But if you extended the animal class and created a fish subclass, you could say fish.swim, and that makes sense. So now we're putting all of our code into a context that makes sense for humans to read, to understand. So when you're making a video game, for example, when you're making a browser game, all of your animals can inherit very similar properties or traits, but then you can overwrite them and you can extend them and you can give them additional properties. So as another example, if you were to make a video game, right, you have superheroes, for example. Pretty much every superhero is pretty fast, if not super fast, and has super strength to some degree. So you would have class superhero, and its constructor would automatically set its powers to be super strength and speed. And then if you have a superhero like Batman, you would write class Batman extends superhero, just like that. And you could have a method in here that adds to that superpower. So this is the power of subclassing. You can write code once and you can inherit it. And inheriting is where the power really comes in. Because when you inherit something, you don't have to write the code more than once. Now, in my opinion, that's good. That's all fun and games. But as a developer, and this is just my personal and professional opinion, don't just stick with JavaScript. In the future, when you get really good with JavaScript, learn something else. And I'm leaning towards Python, and I would push you to learn Python because it's similar to JavaScript. And when we start talking about classes and constructors and inheritance, that's all going to make perfect sense to you. You're going to be familiar with these already. So your assignment for this lesson, create a class. It doesn't have to be an animal. Create your basic class. Don't forget your constructor and pass a couple parameters in there and just set it up with a few properties. Don't forget this keyword is very important. Otherwise, your variable is considered local and local to this method. Then I want you to go ahead and extend that. So if you have the superhero class, extend that for class Superman extends superhero and overwrite one of the methods that you've already written in its parent and just go ahead and check out what this can and cannot do for you.